This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. And if you could, please do me a favor and take a moment and leave a rating and review in whatever podcast player you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, doesn't matter. I would greatly appreciate it. And that feedback really helps get other listeners to the show. Also, if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you feel so inclined, you can go to geekleader.com/tip and donate to the show. Thanks so much. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Tom Bairstow on the show. He is the founder, creative director, and designer at NorthHouse, and we're going to talk a lot about the work that they've been doing and how technology and leadership has all infused into making that company what it is today. Anyway, with all that being said, Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and how you got into doing what you're doing and why you founded NorthHouse.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically I started NorthHouse back in 2011, 2012. But as with many creatives, you know, the fascination with, the things that I was most interested in, which was combining music and visuals. And coming from a musical background, I'd played in touring bands when I was younger. And then kind of started progressing to making music videos to the bands I was working with and the bands that we'd used to perform with. And that really progressed into just kind of finding this industry, which was essentially that kept me involved in live music, which was my main passion.
So what kind of music did you guys play?
We were back in my main band. We were quite an alternative heavy rock band.
Nice.
And so I came out of that band, and before I knew it, I was doing the visuals for One Direction. So it was kind of two polar opposite worlds combined. Yeah. But I think I really loved the experience and the atmosphere of a live show. And, you know, what live music can create. And it's still one of our biggest, you know, it's how we kind of phrase, you know, why we love what we're doing now. It's about the connection between music and people and visuals. And it's always been such a big factor for why I've loved doing what I do. And essentially why I started out, really.
So what do you see, like, technology taking, you know, live shows in general and that you know, all the cool things that we're starting to see now that are out there? I mean, like the Globe in Vegas, that's really been, you know, huge. Where do you see this stuff going?
I mean, it's just progressing so quickly. And as a studio now, you know, we've got to be on top of it at all times. I mean, I must say that these days, you know, we're working in many spectrums. We're obviously across live music. We're doing a lot with brand events and brand activations. We're involved in a lot of immersive experiences. We're designing ceremonies and immersive experiences, installations. And across all of those, there's a need to really combine the latest technology with design. And I kind of see the two as a very equal split in many ways. Venues like the Las Vegas Sphere, I mean, we designed something for another venue similar to that in scale, which is called the Al Wasl Dome in Dubai. Which was built specifically for the Dubai Expo, and we did a really amazing show there with Coldplay back in 2021. And that in itself had such huge technical challenges. You know, it's a huge 180-degree sphere, 360-degree immersive visuals, and resolutions are just absolutely off the scale. And, you know, similar to the Las Vegas Sphere, you're dealing with 100 million pixels and, you know, making sure you've got the technology and the hardware and the software that can keep up with these venues that are getting bigger and bigger in scale.
Yeah, I imagine the GPUs behind that are just insane.
Astronomical. But then, this is kind of where the new technologies come to play as well, because obviously, you know, your processing power, your GPUs have to be bigger and bigger. But then we're consistently trying to find more efficient and effective ways to produce the visuals, to design the shows, to find, you know, really, really interesting ways to kind of drive the creative through technological solutions. And of course, AI has become a factor within that as well. And initially for us, AI began as a tool to help, increase the resolution of an image, for instance. And that's going back a few years now. Obviously, we're all very aware that it's progressed significantly since then, and we're using it in such a much broader use within our toolkit now. But there's tools out there that can really help you to kind of drive these projects forward, despite the huge technological hurdles we're consistently overgoing.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do with AI now, especially from a design perspective. I mean, we just recently used it for an e-commerce project we were working on, where we were low on budget, we didn't have enough resources to hire good models and photographers, so we generated all of the models wearing the outfits or the holding the coffee cups and everything, all was generated through AI, which is just mind blowing to think about just a few years ago.
Yeah, amazing.
So how are you guys using AI today, like for a live show or for some kind of atmospheric event that you guys are putting together?
Well, it's really interesting. I think as a team, as a studio, as a collective, where both traditionalists and technological explorers, we've got a huge combination of designers and technologists really pushing and really wanting to explore the AI side of things, and we've got many who are just really keen to keep on the hand-drawn illustrative approach. We use it nowadays in almost every step of the project. It's really helpful in the earliest stages of a project to actually kind of visualize an idea really quickly. And that's something that we've found fascinating and has really increased the creativity and the flow of ideas, because you could be trying to imagine what something might look like. Creativity ultimately is just a combination of ideas and combination of references. And so ultimately we can quickly say, well, how would A look with B, and put the two together, and it can help to steer the overall creative vision a lot faster than you would traditionally have done that. Now, we'd never use that for a finished product. That would be, concept art, and it would help to drive the ideas even further forward. But it's a fantastic tool for that side of things. Throughout the project, there's, a variety of tools, from, the more practical tech tools like upscaling to actually, helping to facilitate the generation of 3D models. There's just so many uses for it now. We're finding that we have to really carve out time every single week to make sure that our lead technical artists, our creative technologists, are consistently staying on top of the accelerated growth of AI, basically.
So when you guys are doing, let's say you're doing something where you're projecting light or virtual lighting onto a building or something like that for a show, how do you guys design that out first and then kind of play around with it virtually on a screen, or how does that play out? I don't even know where to start with something like that.
Yeah, I think two of our biggest projection mapping shows recently have been the Queen's Jubilee and the King's Coronation, that happened to be a year apart. The first one, the Queen's Jubilee, was actually projection mapping Buckingham Palace. And the second was the King's Coronation projection mapping Windsor Castle. Now, Windsor Castle is a really ancient 11th century building with some really interesting architecture to play with, very detailed, very difficult actually to work around and very difficult to project onto. But the first steps are, you scan the building, you use a LiDAR scanner, you essentially then create a 3D model from that. And then we bring that into our own software that we've developed in Unreal Engine. And then this software that we've developed actually helps you to pre-visualize exactly how your designs, your visuals might look on the building at different times of day, night, from different camera perspectives. We'll feed in the broadcast camera angles from the BBC, who we were working with at the time on this. And it's just, it basically helps you to get to a 90% point before you actually arrive at the castle itself. And again, that's just, it's a real benefit to be able to have this kind of technology these days, because you roll back 10 years and it was so difficult to actually be able to get to this point before you got to the actual location. But now we can visualize the whole space in a VR headset and get an amazing feel for exactly how it's going to be once we're there.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy because I just started playing around with little projection mapping at my house for Christmas decorations, and like having to draw out like the roof line and the windows and things like that. But I don't have the nearly the tools that you have to actually see how that would work. And one of the things that surprised me is when I did it and I started putting it out there, I was like, oh wow, my windows aren't reflecting the way I thought they would.
Yeah, exactly. Windows tend to be the trickiest surface. I mean, anything that's reflective just does not absorb the projected light.
Yeah, and what was even odder is like my son, for him, he had his blinds open. My daughter had her blinds shut. So he's like, I'm looking at two different things. I'm like, well, I thought they'd be the same. And he'd up there and yell at my son, hey, shut your blinds.
Well, actually, funnily enough, when we projected on Buckingham Palace, we actually had to ask them to draw all the curtains and turn the lights off.
Oh,
in
yeah.
itself, which was quite funny on the night before the show, rehearsal night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned VR. Are you guys doing much with VR to actually visualize how things are, and are you doing anything with concerts in VR?
We're doing it. Yeah, we're doing a lot with VR, AR, mixed reality, extended reality. We actually directed and created a Coldplay promo film in extended reality. With VR, we use it really as a huge pre-visualization tool. It's amazing to be able to design something quite often as simple as a 360 video that you can send to the client, a partner, and they can understand how it feels, in a kind of an immersive space, really, which is essentially the vast majority of the work we do is never really designed for a flat space. It's designed to actually work in the location and the surrounding area. And so that's really important to get a feel for it. But VR is an interesting one because it's, in many ways, I think everyone's still kind of waiting for it to really kick off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the hardware and the headsets that will really help drive that forward. And obviously, I think we've all seen quite a progression quite recently, which basically combines augmented reality and virtual reality. And I think that mixed reality is essentially where things will really take off, where people can still be grounded and get a sense of where they are in the real world, but also have the augmented reality assets that, help to develop the environment further.
Yeah, definitely. And, I've had a Oculus for a while now and, I love playing it, but you're right. The headset just, it's kind of your bottleneck on that,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I can't say too much, but this next year, 2024, we're actually in talks with someone about essentially a metaverse concert series, but it's in theory combining augmented reality as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. Like with augmented reality, I see so much potential, especially when it comes to like training and learning. Like there's a app, Piano Vision. I don't know if you've heard that, where you can learn to play piano through augmented reality. So I can sit in front of my actual piano with the app and learn to play. And I think things like that are just the first steps of what could be a really awesome experience.
Exactly. And I think when we're talking about experience, I think something that is really important is to remember that most of the time it's a shared experience, and that's what really helps drive these shows and these experiences forward. And I think the downfall, in my opinion, or the real challenge with full virtual reality is that lack of shared experience. And I think that's where mixed reality and augmented reality come in, because then you can actually be on a human level connected as well, as opposed to it being completely virtual.
Yeah, because I think what you're saying is, it sounds like when I look at the games that are the most popular, they're the ones that you play with other people,
Exactly.
Whether it be like what's that, used to be Top Golf, but then I guess it rebranded, I forget what it's called now, Golf Plus or something like that, where you can play golf, but my brother-in-law has it too, so we could go and play 18 holes virtually together with the Oculus if we both signed it and decided to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, I think, as you're saying, within the games, to have the connected experience. But I think, again, just relating back to, especially within our world, when we're kind of designing and creating the visuals for a Coldplay show, you really get a feel for that actual human shared experience and how powerful that can be. I mean, there's other shows we've done where we've combined augmented reality within the broadcast camera feed. And that's a really nice way for people to take the show to a different level. So, for instance, we did Disney's Encanto, the Hollywood Bowl, with Full World 73 Productions, and obviously Disney concerts. And, this was in November 2022. And so there was an audience over 2 nights that got to see the show live, where we projection mapped the Hollywood Bowl. But then we basically also had augmented reality that was a feature, but that was only in the broadcast cameras. So the audience could see it in the screens on site, but not, to its full potential.
Yeah, they didn't have the 360 view or anything, or?
No. So they'd see the screen, but really it was only ever designed for the broadcast cameras, so that once the audience and once all the people at home could see it on Disney Plus over the festive period, they could then see it with augmented reality. So we had particles that would appear to fly out the screen. We had a giant Bruno that was augmented reality that appeared behind the stage. And so there's another level of visuals that just really helped to take the show to another level, basically.
Do you see a future where, sporting events are all done with some type of augmented reality or VR headset where I could be at home and I could watch the World Cup from my living room and feel like I'm there because I have this full immersive experience?
I don't know. It's going to be so interesting to see how things progress, because I think everyone thought VR would really take off. And again, with the reasons we've just discussed, it hasn't quite taken off. But I think augmented reality, once there's a set of glasses that you can wear, just like a normal kind of wearable item, like a normal piece of clothing, then I think that will drive things forward quite significantly. And especially for the at-home viewers watching sports events, as you're saying, I see more and more sporting events having these huge intro shows or these, halftime moments where augmented reality is brought in to completely transform the venue into something else entirely. But again, that for the people back at home, that's only seen as another layer on a flat screen. Whereas I think the interest will really come when you can wear the glasses at home as a wearable item, and then suddenly the visuals immerse you and come out of the screen themselves.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. One of the things that we talked about kind of before we started recording is the fact that your company's kind of grown, quite a bit lately, and you're having to kind of manage things and do things a little bit differently than you did a little bit before. Can you talk a little bit about that experience? Yeah,
I mean, as with many creative business owners, you start life as a creative, as a designer, as a maker, and so I began this journey, as I said, as essentially a video editor that started to use animation tools, that then started to use After Effects, and as soon as I began to use 3D software, I realized I needed a small team to help me because I could not get to the level I needed to get to in time. And then as I gradually built the team up, more and more projects came in, etc. And, over the years, we I'd say from about 2015 to 2020, we were only a team of, say, 5-6 full-time staff. But we had many freelancers that would come in, so we'd expand and contract, kind of breathe in and out as the projects came in and completed. Obviously, we all suffered lockdown. It was a very difficult time in many respects. But then after lockdown, we just had the whole industry, I think, well, I hopefully believe for, everyone, it got suddenly very busy. And so we just gradually grew, but really that gradual growth accelerated over the last year, over the last 18 months, where we jumped, we're up to 17 full-time people now. And it's been quite a significant change because we've had to really look at the structure of the team and look at how we operate as efficiently as possible and look at lines of communication between different members of the team and kind of compartmentalize the team into like smaller departments. So it's a really interesting phase, actually. I'm actually really enjoying the growth element to it. I'm really enjoying building, a great team and a great studio, but it does have challenges. And despite many of my peers warning me about the growth from 10 to 20 people being one of the hardest periods, until you're in it, you don't realize the challenges you're going to face.
Has it been hard to kind of let go of certain things and give ownership and responsibility over to other team members?
I guess I've worked really hard at just building up a great team of people. So actually letting go has not been the hardest part, really. But that's because I think building the team and finding the right people has definitely been one of the hardest parts. You've got to make sure that the team you can trust, that you've got a good enough balance where everyone's kind of aligned with the overall vision and the overall goal, but everyone also has their own individuality and their own skill set they can bring to the table. So you're not all just trying to attempt to do the same task. You've got a huge broad range of skills, ideas and approaches. But yeah, I think the challenge has been, in many ways, me, as you're saying, kind of trying to step into other areas that I wouldn't normally have been in. I'm instinctively just drawn into making things and crafting, and to get used to just putting ideas into things and just overseeing is quite different. But you realize that there's only a certain amount of time, and finding the balance is the most important thing to avoid the inevitable burnout that if you try to do everything, it's near impossible.
Yes. So what are some tips that you have for avoiding burnout and finding that proper balance?
It's exactly what we're talking about, really. I think avoiding burnout really comes down to putting systems in place that helps everyone to understand what their roles, responsibilities, where they're, to basically help delegate across the team. And that's not just you kind of palming everything off on everyone. It's to understand where you're best fit as well, and to help everyone else work around that. So we've taken some really big, deep dives into just understanding, like where everyone really is best suited within the team and how to kind of basically play into everyone's skill sets. And off the back of that, it then, it helps to drive this idea of, not everyone being spread really thin and trying to juggle too many things. So I found myself, a few months ago when we were really in the thick of growing, well, actually earlier on this year, just trying to jump between so many different roles, from business and finance into marketing, into project creatives, into, into so many different roles and wearing so many different hats. But then realizing actually I had to just compartmentalize the time and block time out in very specific time blocks ultimately, just to try and focus on individual tasks or individual roles rather than everything all at once, which is where I think burnout can come from.
Yeah. So do you recommend like putting big chunks of time and dividing them out to specifically like, this is going to be, financial planning time. This is going to be creative time. This is going to be, whatever time, put it on your calendar that way, or how do you justify doing that?
Yeah, I work in 30-minute blocks. So I do my very best to plan ahead and actually just carve out the time in 30-minute blocks. Now, obviously, those blocks can be stacked on top of one another. So if you really need, for instance, tomorrow we've got a team workshop with some of the senior team, and we've carved out a 2-hour block there for a good deep dive into that. Other times I'll, carve out a half an hour block for, say, finance and then jump into another section. But often I do find half an hour is not quite enough, but it's enough if you need to just get a few tasks done. But there is a lot to be said for the planning aspect. I think it's really important to just do your very best to take control of your own time and to just try and find ways when often it's, especially in this industry, I mean, we're in a creative industry combined with live music, live entertainment, and it can be very chaotic unless you actually just do your best to try and get on top of things. So within the time block mentality, it's also a good way of actually setting a few anchors within the day and within the week that are almost, this cannot be moved. At 12 o'clock on Monday, we have to have this production meeting. At 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, we have to have our marketing meeting. And everything else can move around those, but those real anchors can just help you to kind of make sure that you're not being totally reactive to the industry, and you can actually still make sure that you're getting your priorities looked at as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely accurate. In most fields, I think it's important to have those anchors that are there. Like for me, I have my Monday morning meeting that will never be moved. That'll always be the meeting that we have, because that sets the tone for the week and lets us know where we're moving forward on, and kind of helps me gauge my team too on what their priorities are and what their struggles are, what their challenges are for the week, to help us plan. Now, other meetings can move around, and maybe my infrastructure team meeting will be pushed back, or we may bounce this meeting here or there, but there's definitely certain anchors that have to be there to guide your team and set those priorities for going forward. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think another thing is we try and work a bit of flexibility into the day. So if we do, often my day is pretty packed out with meetings, but especially for internal meetings with the team, we do our very best to kind of provide a bit of flexibility, because we're in a creative industry, and things are very much grayscale. It's it's not defined, it's not black and white. A lot of the time we're trying to figure out some real creative or technical hurdles to a project, and there's never an exact amount of time you can calculate or predict to do that in. So sometimes we'll just push a meeting back a little bit internally, and I think we're just I think as a team we're becoming more we're trying to create structure, but it's about finding the balance as well, where that you have to have a bit of flexibility in the creative industry as well.
Yeah. So one of my favorite books is by Todd Henry. It's called Herding Tigers, and it's about leading creative people. And I'm just curious, what do you think is the most challenging or difficult thing when it comes to being a leader of creatives?
The most challenging thing to
leading creative people, and understanding the balance between like creativity versus structure that has to come along with leadership.
Well, I think in a similar way to carving out these anchor points in the week, I think that within the creative process, there's carving out any areas you possibly can that set ground rules, that create something that's black and white and that is objective. I think the subjective versus objective scenario is very heavily balanced, or leans to very heavily towards subjective. And I think trying to find any anchor points within that process is really important. And that varies from project to project, and on a team or on a person level, you've got to make sure you're working with that person on a human level, because that's something you've really got to take into consideration. Everyone has a different approach to something, everyone has a different interpretation of something, and again, it's about working on a very kind of individual basis there, because there's so many different ways you can interpret one idea, and there's so many different ways that someone might go about creating something, and it's about working with that person.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, because everybody has a different lens that they look through life with, and they have that different perspective. And sometimes, when it's not your idea or your way of looking at something, you think, oh, this might not work out. And then you find out that it's just so much better because their perspective was so different.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, as a studio, we've always been very collaborative as well. I think it's the collaborative approach and the kind of the hive mind that really helps fuel some incredible ideas that, as we said right at the start of the podcast, can take references from so many different angles, but come together to create one idea. And I think in some ways, the more people that can feed into that, the better. Then obviously there's the other scenario, which is too many cooks spoil the broth. I do think, again, it's all about balance. And I think that the best approach is really to kind of bring as many ideas into something as possible, and then just start breaking that down into where the focus needs to be.
No, I think that's really good. Tom, it's been great. How can people connect with you online, learn more about what you're doing, and stay in touch?
Well, yeah, thank you. It's been really good to chat. Our website is northousecreative.com. You can find us on Instagram as northouse_, and the same on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And I'll link to this in the show notes too at ageekleader.com, so people can click through and find you there. Again, Tom, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please go to geekleader.com to learn more about what this guest is up to. Click on their links and connect with them online. I would also greatly appreciate it if you could leave me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. And make sure you've subscribed if you haven't already. And if you feel so inclined, you can leave me a tip by going to geekleader.com/tip.